Good evening, class. This is Mrs. Pender Harrison, and tonight you're going to be taking some Cornell notes on the art of persuasion, or in other words, rhetoric. Go ahead and pause the video, set up your notes in Cornell style. You can see the attached link on Google Classroom if you need a reminder, and let's go ahead and begin. Before we get into rhetoric, we want to get some background information on where this rhetorical analysis comes from. Aristotle is considered one of the greatest Greek philosophers of his time. He was a student of Plato. Plato was in turn a student of Socrates. So Socrates taught Plato, and then Plato taught Aristotle. Fun fact, Aristotle then went on to teach Alexander the Great. So these were Greek philosophers who discussed a wide number of topics. Aristotle wrote on everything from logic to philosophy, ethics and physics, biology, psychology, politics, and rhetoric. Rhetoric is the art of persuasion. The goal of persuasion is to use things called rhetorical devices to change others' point of view or to move others to take action. Today we're going to be going over a very broad definitions of rhetoric. We'll get more into the rhetorical devices sometime next week. Rhetoric matters because to get what you need and what you want in life, you must be able to convince people using sound rhetoric. Everyone, from advertisers to politicians, other public figures, will constantly be using rhetorical devices to affect you. You'll be able to make more informed decisions if you are aware of how these messages work, meaning that knowing how to use these 3 ways to persuade will help you be as persuasive as possible. Aristotle described the 3 big ways of persuading someone else as logic or logos, ethics, reputation, credibility or ethos, and emotion or passions as pathos. Let's start with logos. Logos is an argument that's based on facts, evidence, and reason. Using logos means appealing to the reader's sense of what is logical. More specifically, logos often depends on inductive or deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning, the kind that we use in a science classroom, takes a specific example and develops a general claim based on it. So in a science class, you would make an observation, and then you would come up with a claim about the world based on your evidence. Deductive reasoning goes in the opposite direction. We use deductive reasoning in math classes where we take a general claim and apply it to a specific situation. Or, for example, you might take a mathematical equation that you know to be true and apply it to a particular problem. So if a writer is using logos, that must mean that they can be trusted, right? Wrong. Despite the fact that logos relies on cold hard facts, people have developed many methods of tricking other people using what appears at first to be logical conclusions. Some of these are called logical fallacies. Everything from a slippery slope, which is the type of logical fallacy that says, if A happens, then B will happen, and we might as well let C and D and E and F happen. Or circular arguments. A is true because A is true. Our second type of rhetoric is ethos, or credibility. Ethos is an argument that's based on someone's character or reputation. It also means that the writer or speaker presents him or herself to the audience as credible, trustworthy, and ethical. The writer or speaker may also mention other experts that support his or her opinion. Ethos is all about making the audience trust you and your message. So, for example, if I was writing a news article about brain science, neurobiology, and I am not a neurobiologist, I would want to include some evidence from a particular source, probably a neurosurgeon, in order to make my writing seem credible. Sorry, the PowerPoint's glitching, so I'm going to go into editing mode. The third type of rhetoric is called pathos, and it's an appeal to someone's emotions or feelings. Some means of using pathos might include personal stories, sometimes called anecdotes, to give a human face to otherwise impersonal facts, using songs or images or other media to evoke non-linguistic emotional responses. You may have experienced this one in the ASPCA commercials that have a really sad song in the background, pictures of very cute puppies shivering in cages. But also making your audience laugh is a way to use pathos or emotions. Usually when we think of pathos, we think of making our audience feel guilty or sad. But sometimes making your audience laugh can also be very persuasive. Sometimes I have students who may ask which method of persuasion is best. While it's possible to find a text that relies on only one of them, sorry, this is still not wanting to work. The most effective or convincing persuasive arguments will often mix all three of these types of techniques. Different people may react differently to different parts of your argument, so rhetoric cannot be right or wrong. It's either effective or ineffective, depending on your audience. Let's sum up. Ethos is the appeal to credibility or trust. Some reflective questions you could ask when looking for ethos are, how does the author prove that he or she has something valid or important for me to read? Or how does the author convince me that he or she is valid, educated, experienced source? Pathos is the appeal to emotion. How is the author trying to make me feel? Or what specific parts of the author's message make me feel certain emotions? And finally, logos. What evidence does the author provide that convinces me that the argument makes sense? Or what proof does the author give? We're going to RQ and ask these notes tomorrow in class, so all you need to do is take the notes. You don't have to do questions or summaries yet. Have a good night.